Yeah, NIL is a huge phenomenon in college sports. How do you manage that? And
It's been something I really did want to lead in. I thought it should have happened 20 years ago, but it should have happened with better strategy, better boundaries, better infrastructure, better accountability. I mean, all the things. We sort of opened up the doors and said, "Oh, go for it," and there's been a high consequence to pay for that.
from last year's Final Four, what was the biggest lesson you're taking into March
Yeah.
Madness?
What does it look like to keep the main thing, and to put ourselves in the position to be playing our best when our best is needed? And we didn't do that last year. We got our butts kicked, and I think that hurt. You either have pain of discipline or pain of regret, and I think unfortunately we have pain of regret, but fortunately we're using that to really increase.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Coach Cori over at UCLA. The team flying at the moment, and I just saw that you've been put on the watch list for the Naismith Trophy for Coach of the Year. So all good things at the moment.
Well, I have a really amazing group of people around me, and I feel like it's actually been one of the most fun years of my coaching. And it really has nothing to do with the winning, though it doesn't hurt. But the way in which this team has approached their business has been really fun to be a part of, and I'm having a great time.
How did you fall in love with this sport?
Ah, I think I fell in love with the sport just because of what it taught me. And early on in my years, I was playing everything. I was actually probably a better soccer player than I was a basketball player. But at that time, there weren't very many scholarships available for soccer, and so basketball had many more opportunities. So that's why I went that way, just so I could get my education paid for. But my dad was a high school teacher and coach, and I was surrounded by athletes and coaches, and I could just see the difference it made in people's lives, from a standpoint of learning and leadership and self-esteem and teamwork and collaboration and all those things. It's just something it was never even like a thought that I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
How would you describe yourself as a coach? What's the most important thing to you in terms of your philosophy?
Absolutely the most important thing is genuine relationships. Our mission of our program is to create a uncommon transformational experience for each young woman that comes through our program. And we want to teach, mentor, and equip young women for life beyond UCLA, or life beyond when the ball goes flat. And I want them to be as proud 30 years after they're done here as they are in the 4 years that they're here. I want them to be as proud then, because they can see how it affected their lives. And so the biggest thing for me and my philosophy is that I want it to be about more than basketball. In the end, banners hang in gyms and rings collect dust. And as important as competitive excellence is to me, it's more important to provide for players things that last. And the only two things they get to keep for the rest of their lives from these 4 years is who they become and who they impact. And so the biggest form of my philosophy is for them to leave proud of who they became and who they impacted, because nobody can take that away from them. It's completely under their control, and it's something that they get to keep forever.
It's a beautiful philosophy. How do you balance it, though? All these characters, these young women, their well-being versus competitive success. It must be easier said than done, right?
It is much easier said than done. But I think that's what keeps me young. It's what's a challenge for me as a leader. How do I adapt without compromising my principles? These days are different, and I think I got to meet them where they are. And part of where they are, there is going to be a level of self-interest. And so how do I be a good listener of what's really important to their self-interest? Because I'm never going to outperform that. I'm never going to outdemand that. But could I say, look, if I give you this for something that's really important to your self-interest, will you go a little deeper in what's best for the team? Will you go a little deeper for a commitment to how to be an elite teammate, to have elite work ethic? I think it's truly, there's some tensions in life that are meant to be solved and some that are meant to be managed. And I think that's one that's meant to be managed. There's tug and pull. There's, a give and take on some of those things. And how can I be adaptable and really understanding where they are without compromising the standards of what I know they're going to need for not only competitive excellence, but for their lives long term.
How are you enjoying social media? Because I love your content, and perhaps that resonates with your players, right? They're all on Instagram. You're super authentic, from coaching tips to just showing your personality. How important do you think that's been for you?
Well, I think most of the time, it's like, I don't know if you have kids or not, but they, like your teenagers, they usually just roll their eyes at me most of the time. Like, oh, here, look at her. Here she goes again. But, I think it's just for me, it's trying to stay authentic. My job is not to be liked by them. My job is not to be their friend, but my job is to be real and to be authentic and to try to be as consistent as I can to what I promised them when I recruited them. And I make mistakes. There have been many times I learned very quickly that if I was going to be a respected, trusted leader, I was going to have to ask for forgiveness sometimes, because I mess up and I don't always make the right choice. And so but I found that when you do that in a genuine way, it actually increases the trust and the, just their respect. And so, but, I think social media, I have to be careful about it just like they do. It can consume, my time way too much. Really trying to not just doom scroll. I try to put some boundaries on no screens, 30 minutes before I go to bed, 30 minutes when I first wake up, some boundaries with that, because I can waste time with the best of them in that. And I don't have time to waste. And so I need to be willing to do that. But, I think it's a tool, and it's here. And the youth of the people that I'm recruiting and the people that I'm coaching, they're using it. So I think it's a medium that I just realized pretty early on that it was going to be important that to maximize the NIL world, to be able to connect with them in their world of that, and to be able to maximize our engagement and exposure from an NIL growth standpoint for individual players. I knew it was something I was going to have to learn.
Yeah, NIL is a huge phenomenon in college sports in the last several years. How do you manage that and the expectations on the players and what they can achieve?
Yeah, I'm a work in progress in that, just being really honest with you. It's been something I really did want to lead in. I thought it should have happened 20 years ago, but it should have happened with better strategy, better boundaries, better infrastructure, better accountability. I mean, all the things. We sort of opened up the doors and said, oh, go for it, and there's been a high consequence to pay for that. That being said, I have a tremendous advantage being in Los Angeles, right? The media market of the world, really, there's not a better Power 4 market from that perspective. I mean, USC is really the only school that can compete with us in terms of what we can offer recruits from a true NIL perspective, and what we can get through NIL Go over and above the revenue cap because of where we're located and the contacts that we have here. And so the good news is I've really been able to leverage that for the sake of opportunity for our players. And I love that women are talking about finance more. They're talking about investing more. They're talking about, hey, what does it look like to be an entrepreneur? And how do I maximize taxes? And how does charitable work fit into that? Like, I never had those conversations in the first 25 years of my career. The women are not trained early on in our culture to think about those things. And now they're really having to engage, which I think is wonderful. That being said, it's just so difficult because we still expect them to be great students. And UCLA is a really a rigorous university. We still expect them to have championship habits and to be mastering their craft on the court. Oh, and by the way, we want you to be great in the NIL space. They all have their own small business. That's really what it is. And so I think I've had to pull back on some other areas because it's just too much for them. And so trying to that's another area where I've got to meet them where they are a little bit and go, okay, I'll give a little bit here. Will you give a little bit in another area so that we can still maintain the string of excellence that's pulled through all of those areas? But it's not easy. And then you're talking about, shutting out outside noise. It used to be, well, just don't read the papers or just don't, watch television. Well, it's everywhere you go and they're being criticized or people have an opinion or, their families or their agents. I mean, so many vested people who are well-intended. All of those people are well-intended, but it is really that much harder to build a synergistic team that's willing to sacrificially serve each other and to put the needs of the team above their own personal needs. That becomes a greater and greater challenge with each year.
How do you feel about the media? You've spoken about it previously for women's basketball, women's sports in general, and what would you like to see improved about the coverage?
Well, I think that, we still are at such a deficit of, percentage of coverage in, ESPN Sports Center, in blogging, in alternative podcasts, you name it. It's not linear television, print media. I would say the engagement, the corporate sponsorship, the ticket sales, the TV revenue, all have gone up at a higher rate than the coverage percentage, if that makes sense. So I would like the coverage percentages to go up proportionately to what we're getting in terms of those other areas I just mentioned. I'm never comparing myself to the men. Like we want more, so men's sports gets less. That's never what I'm about. I love men's sports. I love what sports teaches everybody, regardless of gender. But I really do want women's sports to get their increased storytelling, get increased coverage in terms of documentaries made, storytelling, sideline reporters, percentages in terms of, the shows like, I love these guys. These guys are actually great supporters of mine, but Rich Eisen and Jim Rome, and they've been amazing. They both had me on their shows. But if you were to just go by the percentages of men's sports that they cover and women's sports that they cover, I'm not sure it's adjusted as much as it could in regard to the growth that we've seen globally on women's sports in general. And those are my friends. Those are the good ones, right? And so you asked me what I want to see. I want the coverage and storytelling to increase proportionately with how we've seen corporate sponsorship, media rights, ticket sales, those things increase as well.
I read that you look to figures throughout all different sports when it comes to great management, great coaching. Who are some of those figures?
Well, so many. In my office right now, I have a broom on my wall, and I really learned a lot from the book Legacy, that about the All Blacks rugby team out of New Zealand. And, the thing I really took from that is that their executives and their captains swept the sheds every day. And I think that I really want to be a servant leader. I don't want that to be a coin thing that everyone talks about. I want it to be really lived out, that I see each day as how can I serve my staff and my team, and what does that look like? And so that would be one. John Wooden obviously is my biggest mentor, but I had amazing mentors but just even I like to study elite football coaches. Like, I like to study. I love going out and walking as our football staffs through the years have been teaching, and I'll go and walk and just circle their practices. But our women's soccer coach was someone I really learned a lot from. I mean, the list is too long. I'm stuttering because there's too many, but I just like excellent leadership. So whether it be business, whether it be different sports, Sean McVay has been someone that I've really enjoyed learning from. I've gotten to know over the last 18 months, and he's just been really great in terms of allowing me to learn from his philosophies and how he does things. In fact, he extended that to Kiki Rice, who wants to be a GM of a professional sports organization. So she got to go spend really 2 straight days with them and got to see all the things behind the curtains. And there's just success leaves clues, and I want to get all the clues I can to help me be the best leader I can be. But I've spent some time with Spoelstra, the Miami Heat. I do a lot of research on Steve Kerr and Joe Mazzulla, but the list goes on and on. I just have a passion for leadership, and I just want to get better. I want to grow and learn from other people, and regardless of the environment or landscape in which you lead, if you're influencing people well and serving people well, I want to learn from you.
You mentioned Kiki Rice. With her and Lauren Betts probably in their final collegiate season, how much is the urgency now to win a national title?
It's interesting. I've been fighting this inner battle that, that's their dream. And my job is to help them be dream chasers. And I want that for them so much. And so I want to be the best version of myself so that they can be the best versions of themselves. And, but at the same time, I don't want them to be defined by whether or not they play well in a 140-minute game. I really want it to be about what their journey was like. I'm a big believer that their greatest goals need to be things that are under their control. I mean, Nick Saban used to say, outcomes are actually your biggest distraction. When you focus on your outcomes, it actually lessens your chance of getting to where you need to go, because it takes your eyes off of the process of what it actually takes to become great. And so, that's the hard thing, because in my heart, I'm like, I want that for them. I want them to be rewarded for all that they've given to this program, to me, to our community. I don't want to let them down. I want to be all that they need me to be this year to put them in a position to be successful. And I want them to not be defined by 40 minutes. So that's the balance I'm trying to find, that they are so much more than basketball players. And I want them, we have them right at the top of their journals. Basketball is what I do. It's not who I am. And so I have to be careful in how I walk that line, right? Is I think it's real. I just want it to be a product. I want it to be that they jumped in so selflessly to present focus and growth and being a sacrificial teammate, that their success to win a national championship just is a destiny because of all the commitment they've made to the process. Anything less than that, I think, is going to be really shallow.
What's the biggest area of growth you've seen in Lauren and her leadership this season, and how far can she go?
There's just no ceiling for her. She's so talented in so many different ways. Her consistency, in fact, I don't have it right next to me, but I wrote this down from our Mind Gym session with Coach Tasha today. Inky Johnson, she showed a video of him, and he was talking about how other people that are elite do things consistently that other people do occasionally. And I think Lauren has grown in her consistency. I think her leadership is more consistent this year. Her love of the game is more consistent. Her work ethic is more consistent. She's just and I think that's the greatest thing, because that will carry with her for the rest of her life. But her talent there are no limits to it. Her perimeter skills, every other day we start with these ball handling drills. I mean, you're talking your 6'8" center, what she does when these ball handling drills, I was like, give me a break. I mean, she won almost every sprint this summer. I mean, she won it. And she's fast. Has a high basketball IQ. She has great hands. She's versatile. It's just amazing. Just the talent that she possesses. But I'm most proud of her character growth, her leadership, and her consistency.
How big a part of the culture is she in the locker room, especially with Sienna, their sister, as well?
It's so funny that Sienna has a bigger personality than Lauren, actually. Sienna is her own person, and she has her own journey. Sienna might go down as maybe the top 5 funniest players I've had in 3 years. She is hilarious. So I don't think there's any problem with, managing the locker room. If anything, Sienna's running the locker room. So, and I love that Sienna is so confident and wants her own journey. I think one of the most fun things for me, I actually asked Sienna this because I heard her on a podcast say, honestly, this is the closest I've ever been with my relationship with my sister. And I asked her, I said, was that for public eye or ears only, or was that really true, Sienna? And she goes, actually, Coach, it's really true. This is the best our relationship has ever been. And so for me, that's just the greatest joy, is they're going to have this memory together, and have it bond them for the rest of their lives. But Lauren is huge. When your best players aren't your best in the locker room, aren't your hardest workers, that's really hard to lead. But when I've got Lauren Betts, really our core leaders, Lauren Betts, Charlize Ledger Walker, Gabriela Jaquez, and Kiki Rice, that's a really strong group of 4 that they pretty much hold it down.
From last year's Final Four, what was the biggest lesson you're taking into March Madness?
Yeah. It's so interesting. We just finished a meeting actually where we talked about that. Like, okay, what did we learn, and how are we going to employ that differently? And how do we go about things, and everything from how we handle the itinerary to who we let in the meal rooms to how much we practice to, how we structure our scouting. So we sort of did a deep dive on what did we learn and how we're going to go about things. I think, there's the amount of distractions that are there. And on top of that, last year we had to sign all these NIL contracts, which was just insane. But hopefully we don't have to do that ever again. But the reality is there are so many more distractions. And so the challenge of knowing what does it look like to keep the main thing, and to put ourselves in the position to be playing our best when our best is needed. And we didn't do that last year. We got our butts kicked. And I think that hurt. You either have pain of discipline or pain of regret. And I think, unfortunately, we have pain of regret, but fortunately, we're using that to really increase the pain of discipline, which I think will pay dividends down the road.
Sometimes fans, when they watch sports, any sports, they forget that these players are human beings, and the mental factor is so significant when it comes to pressure, whether you're in front or whether you're chasing. How do you manage that pressure?
Well, I think we try to reframe it, right? Today, we actually talked about that in the Mind Gym, and Tasha asked a question like, okay, when you're about to see, when you're about to go into a really pressurized game, what is the emotions that come up? What is it like for you? And there's a big moment, a pressurized moment. What's it feel like? And some people said butterflies, and some people said, just like their chest beat, their heartbeat beats faster, or whatever it is. And then she turned it around and said, all right, what about when you get to see your significant other and you sort of fall in love, or you have a big moment with them? What goes on? What's it like? And they said, same emotions. Butterflies, their heart beats faster, their mind starts to race a little bit. And she goes, isn't that interesting? 2 totally different things and same kind of triggers or emotions. So it's all about our perspective, and we can frame our perspective. So now it's a matter of giving them the tools of, okay, when you experience that state change, that nervous system change, how do you control the perspective and the lens in which you see it? And Tasha is so brilliant in how she leads them in our mental conditioning program, but giving them the tools. It's obviously a catchphrase to say pressure is a privilege, and we say it too, but then what? Okay. Pressure is a privilege. We've earned the right to feel this, but now how do we channel it so that it helps us be the best version of ourselves? And so that, and it's not a distraction. So how do we train the proper perspective and frame that we want to put those emotions in? And so we really work at that, because, if you asked any basketball player, what percentage of the game is mental versus physical, they're all going to say 75, 80, 90% mental. But then if you ask them, well, tell me the last time you went to the gym, what percentage of your workout was based on the mental side? And they're like, but mostly that's because they didn't know how. No one's given them the tools to actually take those concepts and then put them in a curriculum or a set of teaching points that they can actually translate to game-like situations. And so that's what we're trying to do.
With the nature of college basketball, you're always going to have to say goodbye to key players year on year. So who are the emerging young voices that you see taking the team forward next season?
Well, we're really excited about our freshman Samto, who's coming in from Spain. We expect to have another one that's probably going to join us soon. Obviously there's a lot coming in from Sienna Betts. There's a lot coming in from Lena Bilic and Amanda Muse. And, those guys are going to be, they've now seen the standard. They know what this takes. They know what our culture demands. And they're going to have to lead in that. But we're obviously in a situation in a new era that we are going to be looking to reload, not rebuild. And we are going to look to aggressively seek elite talent from the portal to really build that puzzle again that has these complementary pieces that can lead to a championship. And so or at least a championship level. That's the goal. And so we're putting ourselves in a position, both from an NIL perspective, from a situation of just being really out there, that this is what we're going to be about, that when the transfer portal happens, this is exactly what we're going to be looking for, and making that known to the stakeholders in the game that might hear about things before we do. And so we're just trying to strategically position ourselves so that we have a chance to compete for the best talent in the portal, so that we are in a position to reload and not rebuild.
What does it mean to be What does it mean to be UCLA and this fan base and being a part of this organization?
Yeah, good question, by the way. I think one of the best parts of being the coach of the UCLA Bruins is I get to look a parent in the eye and go, name another place that's going to give you the academics that we can give you, the access to the alumni network that we can give you, the competitive excellence that we can give you, the NIL package that we can give you, the opportunities above the NIL package that we give you because we're in Los Angeles and because of the contacts we have. And also, most importantly, where else can you go that's going to take such an intentional approach about investing in your daughter from the inside out? And I really am proud. I'm proud to represent a program that can look parents in the eye and offer those things. And that's really meaningful. The UCLA brand is really powerful on a global scale, not just in the United States. But I always wanted to start with the heart and character and from the inside out. Coach Wooden used to say, remember, Cori, you're not coaching people's jump shots, you're coaching people's hearts. But then with his big blue eyes, he'd usually wink and go, but if you coach their hearts really well, usually their jump shots end up pretty good too. And that's what I want to be about. I want to be about a program that raises banners and wins championships, but always I always want it to pale in comparison to the young women they become, because that is the thing that they will value and use for the rest of their lives.
Is there a feeling that something special is happening right now, that this is a championship season?
Yeah, it is. I think it has the potential to be. I think it's we definitely have all the tools. So I think maximizing those tools, placing growth at the top of the priority list, consistently being willing to celebrate somebody else, even if it's not your day. I mean, we had 7 players in double figures the other day. That was a program record. I mean, who gets to experience that? But there also are nights that it's different for different people. And can we maintain our level of selflessness to go, hey, whatever it takes to help the team win? And, I think that's going to be the big challenge. Is the 3 things I'm really focused on as a leader is, focusing on intentional growth. What are the small little growth steps that we must stack days with? And then what's the selflessness? How are we doing with that? How are we always saying, hey, you know what? How do I die to myself a little bit for the sake of the team? And that always comes back to self tenfold. That when people say that, You're like, no, you got to just worry about you. You got to do you. And I was like, oh, that's such a shallow way to live. For me, that's not what we built on. I want our players to know that it is so much more meaningful and gratifying to give than to receive. And when you live that way, it always comes back to you individually tenfold, And so I just think those are our challenges: intentional growth, selflessness. And then the last one is just shutting out the outside noise. If people are not in our inner circle, they don't know. And they're all well-intended, even your family, but we need to have a disciplined approach about what we let into our attention circle. And I think if we can do those three things well, I really do think there's a sense around our community that we got a chance to do something really special.
Beautiful coaching philosophy. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and all the best. Good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it so much. Thanks for being with me and for letting me join in on your show. And I always love to talk about things that really matter, and you've given me a chance to do that. So thank you.